Hello and welcome to the Mil Tech Virtual Toolbox, where we take an in-depth look at the tools that engineers use to navigate the design process in military electronic systems such as radar, electronic warfare, communications, and other mission-critical systems. My name is John McHale, Group Editorial Director with Military Embedded Systems, and host for today's broadcast, where we will discuss tools for implementing AI and cybersecurity protection in embedded systems via open architecture frameworks. With our guest, Duc Tran, Vice President of Global Marketing with Aitech Defense Systems. Duc, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Duc has some interesting things to share with you guys about how to solve some of these, how to get AI into your embedded systems, and also how to keep it protected through cybersecurity. So why don't you get started? Let's take a look at what you got.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of post-COVID world and what we're going through this year to talk a bit about AI and deep learning and some of the cybersecurity threat that we are seeing. A couple of the trends that we see is one is the defense industry in a post-COVID world. It's got to deal with economics, the economic fallout, the difference in the geopolitical fallout of the kind of the new reality. So that's one trend that we see happening, and that has some implication, which I'll talk about the implication shortly. And the second thing is there's a military conflict is not going away, unfortunately. I think the type of conflict may be changing, but the conflicts globally, it's still there. So these are the two trends that we see affecting our industry quite a bit. And I'll get into a bit more detail about this industry in the next, shortly. Just from a macro economic perspective, what we see COVID happening and doing is that it has an impact on the kind of a GDP globally, and we expect things to recover, particularly with some of the news, the vaccine, if things happen as we expect, then we expect the recovery to be quite strong, and that's certainly it's going to help a lot of the military market. So we actually, this was done some time ago, and we actually feel this is the curve that it's going to happen.
So Duc, you know, that wasn't the only thing that happened this year in terms that impacted the market. How do you guys see the change in administrations from Trump to Biden impacting defense?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a little bit of a tricky one as well.
Very topical.
Yes, it is. I think a couple of things. One is it's not so much Biden versus Trump, it's so much the economic fallout of COVID. And that's going to drive a lot of the decisions, irrespective of who the president is. You can expect that the focus is going to be reviving the economy. The focus is going to be on some of those things and borrowing a lot of money. And so we expect military spend and all these things to maybe, I don't want to say decline, but I think it'll be more stable and not necessarily continue at a fast growth. And I think it's going to mean some hard choices for the government and for the military particularly. And for example, that's why one of the trends that we see is equipment modernization is instead of buying brand new aircraft, I think you can upgrade current equipment and upgrade some of the equipment that you currently have. So that's one thing that we see. And the second thing is, I'm going to assume that Biden is more multilateral, kind of rebuilding the links with the allies, traditional allies. Whereas Trump was very much going along kind of a philosophy. And this perhaps has implication in terms of the open standard. So right now, the open standard, it's US-centric. But I can see where if no other country coming out with standard like SOSA and FACE, why not adopt the US standard as well? And particularly if you have an increase in collaboration between traditional allies, NATO allies, all these things, then I can see that playing out where the US standard could propagate into more countries than just in the US. So these are the two. These are the two trends I would foresee. Beyond that, I mean, this is a loaded question. So,
well, NATO has adopted open standards before, so that could be, so definitely keep going. Interesting stuff.
Okay, so so a couple we analyze the market and some of the things that we say we think can happen. I just mentioned the equipment modernizations. The other trend that we clearly see is acceleration of digital technology. I think we all hear about COVID being not necessarily changing the world as much as accelerate some of the trend that's already there. And the digitalization is a trend that's already there, that's only accelerating. Militarization of space is another one. Unmanned solutions, light, fast, and all these things. And then what I just mentioned about government agencies and prime adopting open standard, and this is going to reduce costs, increase collaborations and all these things. And then the last point we're seeing very clearly is localization and supply chain flexibility. We see the impact, not just in the military, but we see the impact in day-to-day product. I mean, we had medical equipment that couldn't get to us because of the supply chain. So I think that it created quite a light on the supply chain needs to be quite localized for that. So these are some of the big trends that we see post-COVID world. And how does it impact kind of our industry is the ever increasing need of computing power. That's an obvious one, but it's accelerating. I think if you see all the things that the militarizations in the future that's only accelerating. Next to that is acceleration artificial intelligence and deep learning. And because of that, parallel computing is something that is done much more than the classical using of CPU, which is more the serials processing. And all of that leads to cyber threats. And so cyber threats is also another trends that we see accelerating because of all of these. And then we also have SwapC optimization. This has always been there, particularly anything that is flying. But this is something that we're going to see an acceleration as well. And then the last two, SOSA phase and localization of productions. So these are kind of the major implication that we see for kind of a post-COVID world. Okay. So I'm going to go through a little bit of some of the details. If you look at this picture, unmanned vehicle, robotics, military robotics, smart soldier, comms, one thing in common is these are all heavy computing power requirements. And so these are the type of things that drives a lot of the need in the future battlefield. And AI, this is the other things that it's becoming everywhere. I mean, you're taking a picture and Lightroom can give you, try to pick the best picture for you. And these are some of the major industry that AI is really having a significant impact. Security and defense is one of them, and autonomous systems. And we can put in there autonomous systems, UAVs, and all these things. So out of these 5 things that you can see clearly 2 things that's really affecting our industry with AI and deep learning. So what kind of computing power technology is required when you do AI is got to do with a lot of parallel processing. When you think about an image process, a GPU is using all parallel processing, whereas a traditional Intel chip will use a series CPU processing. And when you combine the two, and what you realize is that GPU are perfect for AI and big data. And so this is why a lot of the product such as a GPGPU, which is a general purpose GPU, this is something that we can use for AI, deep learning, big data, all these things that we can apply into the military and space technology. So this is why GPGPU is something that's really popular, and it's something that we see only increasing in the future as a result of it. Okay. This is an example of a GPU that we have, one of the product. You can see it does kind of all the various functionality that you can think of. You have the cameras inputs, you have unmanned aircraft systems, you have signal processing, You have multiple inputs, and you can capture, analyze data, tracking of targets, and all these things. So this is an example of one of the product that we've got as a GPGPU. And just to show an example
before
of application.
You go forward there, Duke, just quick question. Talked a lot about, you know, data, big data, and filtering the data. That's really a problem for the warfighter right now, isn't it? When they get all this data being produced by these sensors in a sensor chain, it's really too much for a human to do. And that's kind of what's the signal processing and the GPGPU is going to enable. Yeah. Correct?
Yeah, so it helps a couple of things. It helps more real time. I think if you have to make decision in real time, you don't want to have human intervention necessarily in it. And so it's assisting the human, but also in certain instance, it doesn't require human intervention at all. So it depends on the applications. So this is an unmanned aircraft with Boeing, and another example is a low orbit flight test inflammable decelerator. Basically, is to prevent you from burning up when you go back from the atmosphere. So these are some of the applications that you can see. You see, it's not just image processing. I think it's GPGPU. It's used in a variety of applications from Mil and Aero all the way to space. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity and cyber threats. So if you have all these computing power and a lot of things being autonomous, and you risk of also, you invite a lot of a cyber attack. And some of the main things is people will try to steal data or try to control your system, such as control the drone or something. But the main thing, it's really about the security of stealing data, and this happens from development all the way to the fielding of the project. So during developing of a product, I think the security system is very important. And I know the DoD has released some standard that all OEMs and all the subcontractor have to follow to be able to get contracts with the DoD in the future, and we're obviously embarking on that as well.
So you got to do cyber from the ground up before you even make the pitch. It can't be something you add on later, right?
Yeah. So we are incorporating all these things as we speak. I know there's various levels of securities, and we're going through all of that. Okay. These are some of the examples, and this is not much different than what you would encounter on your personal consumer product. The same type of attack, authenticating of software, protecting of the network interface, preventing of BIOS tampering. So these are all the things that actually we can feel as well in other industry. It's not unique necessarily to the Mil and Aero and space market, but this is something that's becoming much more prominent. And also it's the level of the difference also in consumer stuff is the rigor has to be higher in this space. Because the cost of unprotected is much higher than the cost of somebody hacking into your home and stealing a few pictures. So it's just more the level of protection that needs to be slightly higher. Okay, I'm not necessarily going to go through individually what each of these are, but you can see the as example the types of cyber attack threats that we have on one side, and this is one of the product that we have. These are the different types of protection that we have under each of the attacks. So
what's the most common? Is it more common to go through software? Or are you seeing a lot more of the hardware cyber attacks?
The most common type of attacks is actually a virus. Somebody install a virus in your systems. So it is more a software attack. The other common attack is stealing of data. You know, it's a lot easier to steal the blueprint of F-35 than designing from scratch. And I'm using as a more of extreme example, but it's data and virus. These are the main attack still. It doesn't mean that it's going to only be those two attacks. I think as we field more systems that are autonomous, I can foresee that the attack could start to vary. But right now, it's still very much viruses and the data. Okay. The other thing that we see an acceleration of, and this is not, again, this is not something that's a new trend, is the SwapC optimization approach. And you can think of it as in two ways. You can have more for same or same for less. And more for same is we see an acceleration in trends where we try to stuff more functionality into the same box, the same form factor. And same for less is you have the same functionality, but try to make the thing a lot smaller. And this is target, for example, small UAV, robotic, and smart soldier. And so there's two clear, distinct kind of optimizations that we see. And this is also, this is a trend that we see accelerating. And actually we're working on something on both of that. It's really interesting. Okay. So I'm not going to necessarily go through this, but this is just the more for less. An example is, more for same, which is you cram all bunch of functionality into one. And then same for less. This is where, for example, the Tiger Lake from Intel is you make things a lot smaller, all into one chip. So these are two different kind of branch of product that we see happening. And it fits right into kind of the whole digitalizations of the industry.
It's also working into, I know you're going to talk about this shortly, is open architectures too, because you're doing the open standard. So you shrink everything down to that size. You're also getting multi-functionality, whether it's having a radar and an electronic warfare system on one board or one FPGA. So
yeah.
Just teasing, I know what's coming up. So I think that's interesting. So keep going.
Okay, thanks. Well, you right on time.
Speak of the devil.
The open standard, these are the SOSA interface. I'm not necessarily going to go through it because I'm sure our audience is aware of that. But Aitech, we join SOSA and phase. And this is very much going to be the future of our product line, where we want to adopt heavily SOSA and phase standard. One is obviously more hardware for the hardware systems, and the other one is a software standard that we implementing. And some of the benefit, and this could be benefit to anyone, it's not just necessarily Aitech customer, it's the market. The whole point of these standards is the ability to bring things cheaper, faster, and they work with multiple systems that you can easier integrate by the OEMs or by the DoD to integrate different systems. So we're embarking on this, and one of the things that we also looking among is also how do we make the system, maybe we can use some of the standard amounts of system also to make it easier to work with each other. So it has benefit for the industry as a whole, but I think as a company, this is hugely beneficial as well to have a standard that you can follow and adapt.
Would you agree? You know, the interoperability is very key when it comes to SOSA and FACE, and I think especially for the end users in terms of SOSA and similar things like CMOS, is the end user is going to result in them being able to get technology to the warfighter more quickly and reduce downtime. And because of that, the end users really driving this, and that's kind of brought the prime contractors along. And I think that's one of the reasons these particular initiatives, consortia, are being so successful. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it's anytime a user, these systems are so complex, and every time you can make it easier to work with one system to another. And when you go up to a high level systems, it's going to come from multiple vendors. And I think for the system to work with each other, I think that's a huge benefit. So I think that's why this has gathered quite a bit of momentum. And we believe this is something that is going to benefit everyone from the user to the OEM to the subcontractors. So yeah, definitely. And one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning also is the militarization of space. We have Space Force that was announced in the US. And one of the trends that we see is COTS in space, and COTS is a commercial off-the-shelf, a product that is that we take to bring it to space. And some of the benefit is very staggering, and we're talking about up to 90% cheaper than customs. So in the space in the past, every time you build something, you get a design from scratch, and the cost of it is very, very, very high. The other thing that it helps is a rapid deployment, and we'll talk about a matter of months as opposed to years. It's also a lower risk, and it end up actually being more reliable as well. And Aitech, we are the pioneer in the space COTS for the last 30 years, and we've flown trillions of miles without failures. And I think more recently, I think we've I forget which one of the asteroids that was landed, take a piece of the asteroid recently. We are on that program. So this is a trend that that helps drive affordability in space down, and this trends we see that it's only going to accelerate because the needs for more satellite, because of internet bandwidth, because of various militarizations of space. This trend is again, it's another one that we see a quick acceleration on.
And doesn't it also tie together some things you talked about earlier? You got open standards because you're going to use, as you're going with, I know you use compact PCI platforms with your products. Space VPX is being kicked around. So there's open architectures. And also, as you use COTS in space and as you get things up there more quickly, there's going to be reduced size, weight, and power constrictions on the boards you use for that particular application as well. Do you agree with that? Is that kind of a convergence of trends? And the space market always follows the military a little bit later, like the military follows the commercial world. So are you seeing that happening there?
Yeah, very much so. I think COTS in military is there, and COTS in space is a trend that is evolving, and a lot of the commercial product are really becoming powerful, and so there's no reason that this trend is not there. And one of the things that we from our perspective is that some of the product can be from military all the way to space. It's got to do with certifications, got to do with qualifications. So we have products that actually can go in both spaces. So yeah, absolutely, it's gonna. There's a trend that's going to be continuing. Okay. And I believe this was my last slide. I mean, I can keep on talking, but I know we only have a certain amount of time.
No, I mean, if you want to, you can go back to sharing your screen and we can talk to each other.
Okay.
In the Zoom world. Excellent. Excellent presentation. So I think what we're seeing here is a big trend is, and everybody's talking about those four-letter words, SOSA and face, everywhere you go, and they're positive ones. And it's ironic because you mentioned COTS in space, because COTS was considered a bad four-letter word for space markets for a long time. And now we're seeing that, as you said, it's evolving, but it's evolving very quickly. And it's not a paradigm shift in technology, it's almost a paradigm shift in procurement and how you have to get things up there, get them up there quickly, and you build in redundancy in the platform itself. So going forward, I just give, that was a good presentation. Is there a website where our viewers can take a look at some of those AI tech solutions for AI and cyber?
So obviously our website, aitechsystems.com. I think we can get, you can get a lot of the information there. And I think on that, I forgot to show the last slide where it has all the contacts number. You can reach out to send us any emails or call us. We'll be happy to share more information.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Duc. Enjoyed talking to you, talking about trends. And thank you guys for listening and watching. And I look forward to seeing you on future broadcasts of Mil Tech Virtual Toolbox.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.